So I'd like to welcome Vince. First, let me introduce Vince. He's our guest teacher for today. And for most of his adult life, Vince says he was an alcoholic, but he also says that he's been happily sober for 21 years. Sadhu, Vince. This change of being started when he deliberately and consciously and even mindfully poured a can of lager into a glass and drank that beer knowing it would be his last. Soon after, he began working with the Wat Thamkrabok monastery in Thailand and with Buddhist-oriented drug and alcohol recovery organizations, helping other addicts and alcoholics. For the last 6 years, he's been teaching meditation and other Buddhist practices and principles to help people recover or to wake up to a life after addiction and compulsive behaviors. He's taught retreats in Ireland, England, Scotland, India, Nepal, and Thailand, and he'll be teaching in Texas and California this summer. So now 21 years sober, he's moved into the Hilltop Pub, the Mindfulness Pub in County Tipperary in Ireland, and is in the process of turning it into a residential retreat center called Nalagiri House. So thank you, Vince, for being here. I'm very excited to hear you speak, and I am going to spotlight you there. And you will not hear any longer till the end of the program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Can you hear me? Just a nod would be, that's great. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from Tipperary, wherever you are in the world. Welcome, and thank you for joining me for this session of the Buddhist Recovery Academy. I always like to start these talks with a disclaimer. That is to say, that what I'm about to share with you are some of the things that I would have liked to have heard 21 years ago when I took my last drink and effectively took my first step on this path to freedom. I can tell you that I consider myself a student and a practitioner of these principles and practices as taught by the Buddha 2600 years ago. I'm a keen student, but I'm not sure whether I'm ever going to graduate. And it's important to remember that my views and opinions are simply that, they're views and opinions and not necessarily the truth. Having said all that, I do hope that what I share with you during this session might be helpful to you. So we're going to start this session with a tranquility or serenity meditation, which is intended to deliberately calm the breath, to deliberately relax the body, and to deliberately still the mind. A meditation that is deliberately intended to cultivate spaciousness and contentedness. So we start our meditation by adopting an upright posture. Whether you're sitting on the floor, sitting on a chair, we adopt a posture that represents to us our heart's desire to awaken. That represents our heart's desire to move away from suffering, to move towards the end of suffering, ultimately to reach an unshakable liberation of the heart and mind. A liberation from greed, a liberation from hatred, a liberation from delusion. Alternatively, we might think of it as freedom from craving, freedom from aversion, and freedom from confusion. So our posture is upright and alert and awake. So we let our eyes gently close. Let your arms and your hands rest easily on your lap or on your thighs. We might start by taking a very deep breath in, completely filling our lungs, and a very long, slow breath out. And as we breathe out, just letting our face be soft. And again, taking another very deep breath in, completely filling the lungs, and then a very long, slow breath out. This time letting the shoulders drop back, relaxed, to open up the heart area. And then one more very deep breath in, completely filling your lungs. A very long, slow breath out. And this time, as the breath is exiting, just letting your belly be soft. And then just let your breath settle down into its normal rhythm. The Buddha's instructions for the Serenity breath meditation are very simple. He simply said when breathing in, you know you're breathing in. And when breathing out, you know that you're breathing out. That's it. There's nothing else to do. There's nowhere else to go. There's no one special to become. Just be yourself. For the next 5 minutes, you're invited to practice breathing in and breathing out. For the next 5 minutes, you're invited to practice calm and pleasant abiding in the here and now. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. And breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. Invariably, a bodily sensation or a sound, a flicker of light across your eyelids, taste in your mouth, a thought entering your head will take your awareness away from your breathing. You lose contact with your breathing. And when you notice this happens, just smile, make a very friendly, gentle note of not breath. And we return our full awareness to watching the in-breath and watching the out-breath. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. And breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. Thank you. One of my favourite quotes, short talks from the Buddhist teachings, is where he says that there are people alive who can claim freedom from bodily sickness for 1 year, for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. There are people alive who can claim freedom from bodily sickness for 50 years, even 100 years. But the Buddha said, there are very few beings to be found alive, very few people to be found alive who can claim freedom from mental sickness, even for 1 moment. And I find that a great leveller. I find that a great comfort that the Buddha recognised human vulnerability, human difficulties. So one way that this mental sickness or mental disease is described on the Buddhist path is the arising of this character called M.A.R.A. In Buddhist mythology, M.A.R.A. is the Lord of Death. M.A.R.A. is the destroyer. M.A.R.A. is the killer. And in terms of people on the path of substance abuse recovery, of course, M.A.R.A., if we relapse, M.A.R.A. really could be the killer. But in Buddhist psychology, rather than mythology, M.A.R.A. might be considered as a distractor, a deceiver. In the early Pali texts, M.A.R.A. tries to stop the Buddha from awakening. And what is curious about these incidents between the Buddha and M.A.R.A. is that most of them happen after the Buddha's awakening, as if the Buddha is better equipped to see M.A.R.A., to spot M.A.R.A., to disempower M.A.R.A. There are stories of M.A.R.A. appearing before nuns, before these various different nuns who go off into the forest to meditate. And M.A.R.A. appears as a being to them, trying to cause horripilation in them. Horripilation is a wonderful word, meaning making that hair on your skin stand on end. But M.A.R.A. tries to frighten the nuns, or he tries to entice them to tempt them away with sensual pleasure, or he tries to sow fears of doubts with the nuns. And as with the Buddha, as soon as the nuns see M.A.R.A. and they name M.A.R.A., M.A.R.A. I see you, M.A.R.A. I know you, M.A.R.A. loses his power. M.A.R.A. doesn't want to drag us to hell. M.A.R.A. rather just wants us to knock us off our path. M.A.R.A. distorts our capacity to see things, or tries to distort our capacity to see things clearly. But although in the stories, in these early Pali texts, the stories about M.A.R.A., he's portrayed as being an external being, M.A.R.A. is just part of ourselves, perhaps a shadow side of ourselves. M.A.R.A. might be said to be the manifestation of some of our unwholesome, unskillful, and unhelpful human tendencies. But they are human, our basic human vulnerabilities are the same. M.A.R.A. is that part of ourselves that distorts reality, sabotages our happiness, and derails our own efforts for liberation. I don't know about you, but M.A.R.A. often joins me on the cushion, and often in the guise of the 5 hindrances. And these 5 hindrances, these 5 obstacles to the path, are so well known, are so universally known, that the Buddha named them. These obstacles that are habit patterns of the mind that stop us fulfilling our full potential, that stop us on this path to freedom. And what are these 5 hindrances? These 5 obstacles to our happiness and to walking this path? There's craving for sense pleasures, craving for excitement, craving for stimulation, getting lost in this doctrine of insufficiency, that I haven't got enough, that I haven't got what makes me happy. How often do those thoughts meet you on the cushion? The second hindrance or obstruction There's aversion in all of its forms: ill will, irritation, frustration, judgment, anger, hatred, fear, dislike, jealousy. How often do they visit you in the tradition? The third hindrance: dullness, sleepiness, disassociation, and tuning out from the world, tuning out from our experience. Perhaps not wanting to wake up, wanting to go back to sleep, wanting to leave this path. The fourth hindrance, the fourth obstacle to our happiness, is agitation, restlessness, worrying and anxiety, concern about the future, seeking safety, seeking security, seeking certainty, where certainty doesn't exist. And then the last hindrance, one of M.A.R.A's favourite tools, is doubt. Sowing perplexities, sowing uncertainty, a paralysing doubt, highlighting our insecurities and inadequacies. Who am I and where am I going? But often these 5 hindrances aren't for me, all 5 hindrances contract around the self. They close in on me and contract around me. But I like to compare them with their opposites. And rather than craving for sensual pleasure, just to experience contentedness. My whole experience, just as it is right now, whether I'm sitting on a cushion or peeling potatoes, just contentedness. And rather than have ill will, or frustration, or anger or jealousy, just to cultivate a sense of open-hearted friendliness. And rather than going around in a fog with my eyes closed, to be awake and to be fully aware of my experience. And rather than being under the influence of anxiety and worry and agitation and restlessness, just to develop, as we try to in our 5-minute meditation, quite deliberately, a calmness, a stillness, a spaciousness, a relaxed awareness. And then lastly, putting aside our doubts, realizing that there is no such thing as security, putting our fears to one side, our inadequacies, and developing a confident, wholesome trust in we can do right, this can be the proper path for us. So for me, when M.A.R.A or the hindrances are present, there is a contraction, a closing down, disassociation with my experience, an unhelpful solidifying around myself. But when M.A.R.A and the hindrances are absent, then even in the midst of life's difficulties, there is an open, spacious contentedness with a healthy, wholesome sense of selflessness. There are clarity and there is understanding. But as I said before, M.A.R.A and the hindrances have an Achilles heel. They have a weakness. As soon as you know M.A.R.A or know the hindrances and you name them, then they lose their power. So how do we recognize M.A.R.A when we come knocking at the door? There's this wonderful simile of mindfulness that the Buddha gives. And he uses this imagery of a city or a citadel with 6 gates on them, at the 6 gates in the city. And each of these gates has a gatekeeper. And each of the gates represents the 6 senses. What I see, what I smell, what I taste, what I hear, what I touch, and what I think. And the mindful gatekeeper's job is to let in the wholesome and keep out the unwholesome, to let in the helpful and to bar the unhelpful. So it's the gatekeeper's job to see M.A.R.A, and knowing M.A.R.A keeping him at bay. So the gatekeepers might well say, M.A.R.A, I see you. M.A.R.A, I know you. M.A.R.A, call another day. But I liked M.A.R.A. M.A.R.A's my friend. He actually helped me on the path, seeing what's unhelpful and unskillful. And I like to use an acronym of M.A.R.A, of mindful awareness, responds appropriately. I probably misspelt that, but yeah, so whenever I spot M.A.R.A or the hindrances, then I bring to mind that acronym, mindful awareness, responds appropriately. And the appropriate response to any experience I have is almost always the response of the heart. Compassion, kindness, and equanimity, and hopefully joy and appreciation. And just to finish my talk, the big subject for this talk, I just wanted to close with some lyrics from the Van Morrison song, the song I Forgot That Love Existed. And Van Morrison says, if my heart could do the thinking and my head begin to feel, I would look upon the world anew and know it's truly real. Thank you. So now we have time for questions. And hopefully Robin will prompt me if there's any questions and I can't see them.
So if you have questions, folks, if you'll just hit the chat icon at the bottom of the screen and type your question to everyone, that would be really helpful. We'll give them a minute for them to come in. And if folks are shy and we don't have any questions, maybe we'll just move back into reflection.
Perhaps just while we're waiting for anyone to come forward with a question, I'd like just mention my current working definition of what Buddhist recovery might be. And it's a working definition, it's subject to change, just like my views and opinions. And for me, okay, there is a question coming. How do you use this in recovery from addictions? I'll answer that by giving you my definition of Buddhist recovery and how I try to practice it. And the first aspect of Buddhist recovery is an embodied intentionality. So that 21 years ago, when I sat in the kitchen very similar to this and poured out that last beer, mindfully knowing it was going to be my last beer, the intentionality was it would be my last beer and there would be no going backwards. You know, that was the reality. I'd been in the gutter too many times. So I came too close to losing everything that I had. So the only way forward was holding on to that intention. Now that intention was more along the lines of moving away from suffering, not aversion to suffering, but moving away from suffering, actually passion, towards the end of suffering, avoidable suffering, and not taking drugs and not alcohol can be avoidable. The other aspect of Buddhist recovery, very, very important, and I put it before meditation, is ethically focused mindfulness. And like the gatekeepers, you know, keeping an eye on what's wholesome, what's unwholesome. So in that respect, the 5 precepts, you know, are wonderful suggestions. You know, don't hurt yourself, don't hurt anyone else. Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. Be very mindful of your sexual and sensual behaviour. This can lead to all sorts of difficulties. Be truthful, be honest. And lastly, the Buddha's suggestion, you know, it's not a good idea to take drugs and alcohol. So at some point, sometimes rather than being led by blind faith, we simply have to trust that the Buddha's suggestion is a move in the right direction. And after a short while on the path, then we develop the confidence that it's the right direction to go in. I'm conscious of time, Robin, so...
Yeah, we do have another question if you would like to try to answer that. We have a couple of minutes. That work, or do you want to you want to go ahead and, yeah, I'll let you.
Thank you, Kira, for the question. In the early days of abstinence, how hard was it to refrain using this Buddhist method? It was very, very difficult. I thought I was having a nervous breakdown, and I probably was for the first year, 18 months. But it was that embodied intentionality, that certainty that there was only going forward. I couldn't go backwards. And this understanding that that was who I was. It's not who I am today, and it's not who I will be in the future. So change isn't, change is a given. I have to work very hard to stay in the past, and if I went backwards onto alcohol, I wouldn't go very far. I wouldn't get very far. I hope that helps, Kieran. It is really around what might be termed satya, this truthfulness, truth and truthfulness in a vow. It has to be an embodied practice.
So, thank you. Deborah Greenfield has a question for us. She wants to know if you would speak a little bit about your Hungry Ghost retreat.
Yeah. Okay. The part of my path, which helps me heal and it helps me learn, is offering Hungry Ghost retreats, which are just putting some of the things, some of these practices and principles from Buddhism that I would have found helpful 21 years ago if someone had shared them with me. And rather than me going through hell for a year, 18 months, there is a more direct way from the Hungry Ghost realm to just being human, from unsatisfiable craving to just being human, to sitting with 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows without running away from them or grasping for more. So the Hungry Ghost retreats are just an opportunity to put some of those principles and practices within a retreat setting. I might just mention the Hungry Ghost booklet, which is a little 40-page booklet. I can flick it properly. That's available on the internet for free download from the Hungry Ghost website, if people might find that helpful.
Excellent. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining me.